I'm Matt Drewette-Card, Curriculum Instruction Assessment Coordinator for MSAD 46 and AOS 94, and centered out of Dexter, Maine, serving the communities of Dexter, Exeter, Garland, and Ripley. I am here today to walk through a very simple definition of proficiency. We talk a lot about proficiency-based learning, proficiency-based education models, proficiency-based diplomas. And to help establish a common language of instruction and a common language of what it is that we are trying to accomplish, it's important that we're all on the same page as to what proficiency really means. So in AOS 94 and in MSAD 46, we have been working on transitioning and building a proficiency-based learning model, not simply because it is a legal requirement, but because we believe it's the right thing to do. We believe that our students deserve this. Our students deserve the absolute best, and that our expectations need to not only be high, but clear. This is a K-12 initiative, which ends in a diploma, and things will look and feel different at the end once this transition is all over than a traditional educational system. So in order to really get to the heart and understand a proficiency-based learning model, let's talk about what proficiency means. You often hear or equate proficiency to being on this 4-point scale. What I'm providing you here is basically just a sample scale of what the different 4 levels mean. And you can see what we are using in our district is these 4 levels of distinguished or innovating, applying or meeting, developing or foundational, beginning or no evidence. On the left side of the chart or table, you can see the description of what the levels basically mean. And it's through here, these proficiency levels, that I want to get to how do we define what proficiency is? How can we just, in very clear, simple terms, define proficiency? And when you're talking about proficiency, there's really 4 parts to it. There's 4 independent, or four parts, components is what I mean, of defining proficiency. And in these standards, in these proficiency scales, and these expectations, in order to meet proficiency, all 4 of them must be met. So let's get into those 4. The first is, one of the things is we talk about rigorous instruction. We talk about rigorous standards. And in order to understand the definition of what rigor means, you need to understand rigor in order to understand proficiency. So rigor is broken into 2 parts, cognitive complexity and student autonomy. Now, student autonomy is all about independence, the ability to do something on their own. An independent and autonomous student who, if we're looking for being able to identify main idea in a text, will be able to do it without getting any help from a teacher or a parent or a peer. So when we're talking student autonomy, we're really talking about independence. To what extent can a student independently do the work, meet our expectations and the proficiencies and the levels on their own? So getting back to our definition of rigor, being cognitive complexity and student autonomy, rigor being one of the core components of proficiency. Cognitive complexity is the deeper thinking, the deeper learning, these higher order critical thinking skills that we've been talking about for so long. This is a very important part of rigor. And when we're talking proficiency, we want to make sure that our students are not just able to recite or identify what we're doing, but they're able to apply it. They're able to actually do something with it. And they're able to take that information, take that knowledge, and put it to some use. The next step in defining proficiency is knowing that there's not one cookie cutter example of a student. Every student is individual. Every student is a person who is, at its core, an individual. It's not a block. It's not just a common grouping. Every kid is individual. So when we are talking about meeting proficiency, when we're talking about students being proficient, we mean all kids. It doesn't matter if they're gifted and talented, if they are English language learners, if they are in AP English or AP History, if they have an IEP, or if they have a 504, or if they're in an alternative ed program, if they go to vocational education centers, if they are homeschooled, it doesn't matter. If we're talking proficient, all kids. This level of independence and meeting complexity applies to all kids, all of them. And that is one of the major messages of defining proficiency and really establishing a constant and consistent proficiency definition. So we've talked about independence for the student autonomy. We've talked about cognitive complexity, which is the higher order thinking and applying what we're doing. And now we're into all. The final of the four components that really go into defining proficiency are our expectations. And they might be our school expectations, they might be our classroom expectations, they might be our district expectations, they might be our state or national expectations, they might be global expectations. There are lots of different ways. The best way that I've found to equate or to really be precise with these are our standards. Our academic standards from Common Core and the main learning results and the next generation science standards and the American Council for Teaching Foreign Languages. These are, for example, standards, and they have performance indicators, and they are very specific of things to do. Our habits of work and the main guiding principles are more of the behavioral side. But these are the way that we expect kids and our students to perform both academically, behaviorally. So when you're talking about proficiency, having very clear, measurable expectations is very important. If you don't have an expectation, if you don't have it clear, you can't meet that level of proficiency, right? So that's the four. You have independently, apply all expectations. So if you're going to say what is a definition of proficiency in very simple terms, I would say independently apply all expectations. A footnote here. This does not mean that all kids need to meet all standards and all performance indicators. That's not what this means. If you're going to say that a student is proficient in if a student is going to be proficient in an 8th grade social studies standard, for example, and getting back to this slide here, if you look on the right, you'll see I can statements. So I can compare, contrast, and interpret interpretations of historical events that are based on different perspectives and evidence on my own. So if a student is going to meet proficiency on that particular standard, they will do it independently. They'll be able to apply it independently. All students will be able to do it and will be able to meet this expectation. There might be accommodations that have to happen. That's totally fine. We're not talking all kids, we're talking all kids meeting proficiency, but not all these specific detailed standards, performance indicators. There's a lot of research out there that says that's impossible, it can't be done. So I want to make sure that when we say independently apply all expectations, we're not talking about meeting every single performance indicator. If you're developing a proficiency scale and you want to be proficient, what are your expectations? It might be one standard, it might be one performance indicator. Then what you're saying is, in order to be proficient, you have to independently apply all of these expectations. I think if we go with this definition of defining proficiency, then we will be a lot clearer and we'll have a better understanding of what it means to be proficient. I'm at Drewette-Card. You can reach me at the information below or check out my blog and website, mattdrewettecard.weebly.com. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.